This is going to be fun. All set. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Serena Hill-LaRoche, and I'm thrilled to be here to introduce our first presenter today. This is Nicole Jenkins, who's here to present on some of her research for us. Nicole is one of the Emerging Leaders awardees for this year for Mid-Atlantic, and we're just excited to have you with us. Thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. So, all right, I will share my screen and we'll get started. Okay. So, welcome to my presentation entitled Singing with Asthma and Allergies and Their Impact on Overall Health and Performance Experiences. I am Nicole Jenkins. I'm a soprano. I'm also a voice instructor at James Madison University. I am currently finishing up my doctorate as a candidate for voice, vocal performance, and pedagogy and lit. And just a little bit about this presentation. I am a 2022 NATS Emerging Leader Awardee. And what that means is basically I was given a grant to go to Chicago last summer at the 57th annual conference, NATS conference. And I had the pleasure of witnessing a lot of wonderful presentations and performances, and was able to meet many people and network and do all the wonderful things that an awardee would be able to do. I also want to say that I was the 2022 intern. So I was also an intern for NATS and was able to work with other teachers in the area and wonderful coaches and mentors at Georgia Southern University. So that was also an honor that I received in 2022. I say all that because NATS is an amazing networking opportunity, and also there's so much that you can learn. And one of the things that I learned as an awardee was basically an opportunity to learn about voice science. And I wanted to just mention Dr. H. Steven Sims, because he is one of the presenters which I am actually going to discuss today. As part of being an emerging leader, my responsibility is to then take information that I received from the national conference in July and then give a presentation on it during the Mid-Atlantic conference, which is my conference. I also wanted to say that there is information and also the ability to purchase the presentation, and I've included a couple of URLs as well for you to be able to peruse for later. So I just wanted to thank Dr. H. Steven Sims for the opportunity to discuss his work that he presented that day, as well as my research on singers with asthma and allergies, and just in order to find pedagogical solutions for the voice studio. Okay. So today we're going to discuss several things. We're going to discuss the impact of allergies and asthma on the voice. I'm going to try to give a short overview of the current research on asthma and allergies, also the importance of early diagnosis, current treatment trends that I received from my research as well as from Dr. Sims, and also some side effects of corticosteroids, which are used for asthma patients. And a breathing technique called the Buteyko breathing technique. And try to help you implement that into your voice studios, as well as some interesting information on university students in the university settings, and part of my research on the survey that I sent out to find out more about what students are experiencing at universities and conservatories, schools of music, with asthma and or allergies. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing is, let's talk about the impact of asthma on the voice. Basically, we have breathlessness, wheezing, chest tightness, and basically a cough as well, that comes with phlegm as well at times. And the impact of allergies on the voice is usually hoarseness, pitch breaks, vocal fatigue, loss of vocal range. And what's so interesting about hoarseness is a lot of times that also coincides with medications for asthma. And so sometimes it's hard to tell whether or not it's from the impact of allergies or if it's from the medication itself. Okay. According to the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, asthma is defined as an incurable chronic disease that causes a person's airways to become inflamed. And often concurrent with an asthma diagnosis are very varying degrees of allergy diagnoses that are also impacting student quality of life on multiple levels. And so I wanted to study this because it is kind of a growing issue, especially now that we've kind of been introduced to what life is like with COVID. I also wanted to talk about how asthma has grown in the last decade, as well as allergic rhinitis or allergies. Okay, so basically, more than 50 million Americans have experienced various types of allergies each year. And it's also the 6th leading cause of chronic illness. A lot of people don't know that allergies is an actual chronic illness. And it's not something that you take lightly. It's something very serious. And it does lead to many other things, like sinus issues, and also hypertension or high blood pressure, heart disease. So it is connected to a lot of other chronic illnesses that we definitely would not connect to allergies. Also, more than 25 million people in the US currently have asthma, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Okay. Here's an overview of the current research on asthma and allergies. Here is a figure from the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, based upon their 2020 ranking of the most challenging places to live with allergies. I'm about 2 hours from Richmond, so that was an interesting observation, and it intrigued my interest as to how students are doing in the area. So this was a major revelation for me, and something that triggered my interest to dig deeper into how this affects the voice, the singer's voice. When it comes to asthma, the Centers for Disease and Control and Prevention also has this figure or diagram, which basically talks about the differences in percentages of people with current asthma by age, sex, race, and or ethnicity. And this is something that Dr. Sims also discussed in his presentation about the disparity within the gospel music community, in which he is an advocate for and serves very much in Chicago, where he works. And so I thought it was interesting to also populate this and kind of make you aware of the disparity in certain neighborhoods, certain domiciles, as he was mentioning as well. That is something that we do have to keep in mind. I also want to add to that there are also disparities when it comes to student housing. And that's something that I was digging a little deeper on with my research and a survey on singers, particularly voice students with asthma and allergies. And it was very interesting, some of the open-ended answers to some of my questions were in regards to housing, student housing, and allergies and or asthma. Okay, so now let's talk about the importance of early diagnosis. One thing that I wanted to just try to slip in are just little tidbits of some of my research on asthma and mouth breathing, case study on allergic rhinitis, and also this other interesting one on cognitive decline. And this is something that was very important for me to study based upon my occupation and my field of voice instruction. So let's dig into those. So the first one, association between mouth breathing and asthma, this is a meta-analysis based on Araújo's research et al. And what she discovered was that there is an association between mouth breathing and asthma among children, adolescents, and adults. And she basically said that it can lead to orofacial, craniofacial, and pulmonary disorder. Similarly, an observational study of 43 children and adolescents with asthma and or rhinitis between the ages of 5 and 14 revealed an inadequate positioning of the mandible and the presence of facial tension during the swallowing of liquid. And so she suggested a speech therapy evaluation when the peak nasal inspiratory flow, PNIF, are not normal or below normal. Okay, so peak nasal inspiratory flow is actually a test or a meter of how much you can breathe out, basically. Yeah. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about allergic rhinitis in singers with dysphonia. Okay. So here, this is a study on the incidence of allergic rhinitis in singers. And he noticed that the basic research was pretty high in regards to singers with some type of disorder, but not knowing what it is and not showing up like in scopes and other laryngeal findings. And so what he suggested was that if a singer or a student is having problems and it's not really showing up in a scope, that maybe it's possible that that person may have allergies, and to suggest maybe seeing an allergist for a skin prick test, especially with students who are moving from one area to another, maybe one side of the country to another. It's important for them to see if there needs to be an adjustment to the environment in certain ways to manipulate the body due to with allergy medications or immunotherapy. He also said that patients with this persistent underlying inflammation are at risk of developing subtle symptoms when they're exposed to irritant triggers. So that was also something to keep in mind when dealing with students. Also let them know that there might be things um, backstage or certain things that they get that kind of get in, kind of irritate the singer. It could be smoke. I read something about a singer actually becoming very sick and having a lot of vocal issues just due to the smoke on stage. So these are things to also keep in mind as well. And lastly, he reported that hoarseness followed by pitch breaks, vocal fatigue, and a loss of range were some of the complaints. Okay, and lastly, Wilkin et al. Did a study on ragweed-induced allergic rhinitis, and he discovered that there is a decrease of cognitive functioning when exposed to ragweed. And so basically, the results were that untreated allergic rhinitis had a significant detrimental impact on vigilance. Also, that their cognitive functions were also impacted, and that the effects were greatest with regards to working memory or psychomotor speed. Okay, so that's really important when it comes to students being able to learn their music or get, I mean, there's so many things that they have to do besides voice and ear training and theory, but they're also taking math classes and English classes and all other gen ed classes, which coinciding with allergic rhinitis could also cause them to have cognitive impairments. Okay, now let's talk about current treatment trends for asthma and allergies. And I'm going to also talk a little bit about Dr. Sim's presentation because he also had some really good recommendations on this. So the first one is Zielen's research on sublingual immunotherapy, or SLIT. Basically, he determined, he did a 3-year study in Germany, and he determined that the relative decrease in the mean number of allergic rhinitis prescriptions per year was greater in the SLIT tablet group. So they didn't need as many prescriptions after taking sublingual immunotherapy. And those are actually drops under the tongue, so not shots. These are things that you can actually have sent to you in the mail. There is there are some issues though with sublingual immunotherapy in that it doesn't cover every single allergy. So if you have multiple allergies, I think it doesn't cover a whole lot, maybe grasses, but if you have other types of tree allergies and things like that, sometimes sublingual immunotherapy won't cover it all. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But patients in the tablet group without asthma at the end of the treatment has a significantly lower risk of developing asthma after treatment. So it helps both with allergic rhinitis as well as the reduction of asthma risk. Okay, and Dr. Sims also answered a question of mine with regards to dryness of the vocal folds. I asked him about recommendations for those that have been on allergy medications for long periods of time, years of time, and whether or not that drying effect on the vocal cords or vocal folds happen within a long period of time of taking it. And basically he said that it's reversible. So if you've been on them for a long time and he's noticing some dryness, he did mention that once you stop taking them, the symptoms improve, or you have less symptoms. So he said for his patients, he puts them on inhaled saline through a nebulizer and tries to switch up their medications. And also he recommended the sublingual immunotherapy. And also he recommended albuterol if there is a problem with breathing. He said he starts with that, and the lungs need to be open. And so his motto is do that first, then get the respiratory tract. Once the respiratory tract is open, then he works with the vocal apparatus and trying to make sure that the vocal folds are well hydrated and apt for singing. Yeah. Okay, these are other additional treatment options that Dr. Sims recommended in his presentation. One was exercise. I also have a little bit of research on that as well. And some of the responses, open-ended responses I received from my survey also expressed that exercise helped those with asthma, so students with asthma. So it's important that you promote a culture of health in your voice studios, in your voice classes. Yeah. The other thing is to recommend plenty of rest, 8 hours a day, if possible. Also in drinking lots of water. And then he also recommended some teas. He showed us a picture of throat coat and throat shield tea. Although he also prescribes medication and he is not against medication, he talked a lot about things like essential oils, mist and steam, or the nebulizer, saline nebulizer treatment instead of medication. So he thinks also in this society where, doctors are more prone to prescribe, in his mind, he tries to do something different first to avoid the dryness and things that come from medication. And I skipped the limiting the exposure to strong chemicals as well. All right, so now let's talk about the side effects of oral and inhaled corticosteroids. So these are things like Symbicort, Advair. These can do some really interesting things to the voice, and let's talk about them today. Okay, so ERA's research in 2004 on voice problems as side effects of inhaled corticosteroids in asthma patients was to examine the prevalence of voice problems in Swedish asthma patients. And she conducted a study of 280 patients from 3 university hospitals in Stockholm, Sweden. And basically she found that there was a significant positive relation between inhalation of cortisone and voice problems. And also some of the symptoms were throat clearing, a lump in the throat, hoarseness, loss of voice. And so she thought the best thing to do was to try to help patients reduce the amount of inhalation of corticosteroids as possible to decrease voice problems. Yeah. Also, Dr. Sims mentioned that there is this disparity with asthma patients in America. And so many of them are prescribed Advair. And it's because it's a more economical solution of inhalers. And for him, he thought that it would create a lot of problems on the vocal folds, and he's seen a lot of problems on the vocal folds. He also showed a picture of what it looks like to have thrush on the vocal cords, which is kind of that white stickiness that basically grows from inhaling too many corticosteroids. And so that is called candida. He mentioned that there are these little white plaques that are along the vocal cords. And even though they are reversible, it's easily fixable. The idea is trying to reduce the usage for asthma and what ways to do that. And he also said that even though a lot of times these medications can cause hoarseness, including allergy medications, it's also more likely that it's just postnasal drip. And so he tries to take care of the patient in a more local way by using nasal sprays than pills as medication for the patient. Okay, so now I want to talk about the Buteyko breathing technique. And this is a method I discovered in my research by Russian clinical physician, Dr. Konstantin Pavlovich Buteyko. And he started this process as a way to help patients with chronic hyperventilation. So hyperventilating, basically. And it turned into this type of test. And it basically is called kind of control pauses. And it's an attempt to increase alveolar and arterial CO2 tension. And that basically is known to reverse bronchospasms, which is what happens to the lungs when someone has an asthma attack. And so this is the control pause breathing test. And you can teach this to your students. It starts this way. You sit down, you close your mouth, and you breathe normally through your nose for 30 seconds. Then you take a normal breath in through your nose, allow the normal breath out through your nose, and then close your nose. And that's when you start the clock, right? And as soon as you feel the need to breathe, you release the nose, and that number of seconds that elapse is your control pause. And it's basically based on how many seconds you can hold your nose or not breathe. And if it takes, if it's less than 10 seconds, and you basically have some health issues there. If it's less than 25 seconds, you still need to seek some, medical attention. And if it's 30 to 40 seconds, then you're pretty good. And 60 plus is excellent. So you can easily try that on your students and see how they're doing in their breath control. But this also is an indication of if there's some kind of allergic or asthmatic issue going on. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit, because my research is based on students, voice students with allergies and or asthma. I wanted to talk a little bit about university settings and what's been kind of the issues going on there with two studies from Ginsborg and Beeman. So the first one is about healthy behaviors in music versus non-music performance students. And he basically took a survey of students from the music performance area and non-music performance students, basically nurses and biomedical science majors. And what he discovered is that, and it could be because, medical, that field is known to pay more attention to the physical activities and about self-regulation, those health issues, because they're studying it, right? So they know a little bit more about that field and how to take care of their bodies because they're studying it. Whereas voice students, vocal or just music performance students in general, scored lower. And it suggested that they were not either learning or applying the information they are given about health in a way that would be useful to them in their careers as performing musicians. And he also recommended a couple of other things in regards to how to prepare them as performing musicians. And so he basically said that he recommended that schools of music and conservatories adopt health promotion frameworks within occupational health courses for students and staff. And I thought that was interesting too. Occupational health. I never thought about that as a voice student, but that is something that would actually help them psychologically as well to perform at, very high levels, which they do. Okay. And then voice teachers' perceptions of, how they're transferring the knowledge of healthy singing and speaking through their vocal technique was something that Dr. Beeman researched, and she found that through this online survey that participants, voice teachers, were not fully aware of their role within the voice care team, which was interesting. Beeman wanted to determine whether participants currently or had in the past instructed a student medically diagnosed with a voice disorder, and discovered that participants who had instructed students with voice disorders were likely to have more positive perceptions regarding their instruction of students' singing behaviors and speaking behaviors, and monitoring their behaviors. So having voice rehabilitation techniques are actually positive aspects in the process of teaching voice. And so Beeman also recommended a book entitled Your Voice at Its Best by David Blair McCloskey. And it's called the McCloskey technique, and basically was used as part of their warm-up routine. But it's in the hopes that singers will be much more aware, being able to visualize certain things going on in their body at all times, not just right before they're getting ready to sing. And so I thought that was very interesting. And I teach a lot of this kind of lengthening and widening and visualizing your spine, your thoracic spine, and the rib cage expanding, and this kind of visual effect. I always kind of start that way in the lesson to help them center and focus on their bodies, because the body is the instrument. It's not just the voice apparatus and the larynx, but it's everything, right? So I thought that this was a very interesting research on how to help instructors, voice teachers, voice professors understand the importance of giving the student some tools and helping them develop those habits of, healthy vocal behaviors. Yeah. Okay. All right. So in my final thoughts, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my thesis. I do have a COVID-19 component, but I thought that I wouldn't go into it just yet because I'm still, everything's kind of still new with that. But I did want to mention this one respondent in my survey. When I basically asked a question in regards to, is it difficult to during the pandemic, was it difficult to get treatment for allergies and or asthma? And so the response was that they verbalized their reluctance to disclose having allergies for fear of being stigmatized or being thought to have COVID-19, emphasizing that they didn't feel safe sharing this information with voice teachers or colleagues. And I thought that that was interesting because there is a stigma, right? So, you know, this idea of not just sharing whether or not, you know, you have allergy symptoms, but whether or not you have COVID, you know, and that whole, that difficulty in navigating your own symptoms with it being so close to COVID-19 and wondering, should I even share this or should I just sing through it? And so I just wanted to encourage voice professors and instructors to be much more sensitive to this process of understanding the voice and developing tools and understanding on how best to work through their symptoms. I read a really good article also in regards to how a really famous Broadway singer gets through allergies and particularly asthma, adult asthma, while performing. And so what was really important that was mentioned was about technique and having classical training. And I wanted to also say that when someone such as myself, who's battled with both allergy and asthma, when I am preparing for a role or preparing to sing on stage, I really give my lungs a workout. Like I know that there are things that are not open and free and everything, but I received that information before I started having severe allergies and or asthma. So I was already trained to work through those issues. I was never worried about it as a student. So having that kind of weight on your shoulder and trying to navigate your vocal journey, it's pretty heavy. And so I want to encourage voice teachers to create a safe space for students, whether they have allergies or asthma or anything else, to bring, to allow them to share, allow them to feel safe in whatever they're going through, and to discover all of the different symptoms so that you can also be a kind of a guide, if you will, for those that are trying to navigate these types of symptoms, you know, and preparing for that audition or preparing for that aria, jury, or even a performance, a school performance. It all matters. It really does matter. Everything that we say and do, they take it with them. And so, yeah, I just wanted to leave everyone with that we have quite a responsibility. And I tell you, now that I'm instructing myself, it's quite heavy at times, but the result is so much more rewarding when we create this safe space where they can grow and become and be able to share, because it's traumatic. It's psychologically traumatic, which I will talk about in my research, and it can be hard to discuss with colleagues. And my survey was pretty skimpy, I must say. I sent it out to, I would say, a little less than 300 schools across the US. I did not get a whole lot back. And I'm guessing it's because of the stigma Of course, there are many other reasons why, but I'm guessing a lot of people don't feel safe discussing this topic. But I just want to encourage voice teachers, especially in the university conservatory settings, to be a safe space for them to open up and talk about these things. And that's all I have for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you so much for sharing all this wonderful information. I actually saw myself in a lot of the information you were giving.
Oh.
And it's easy to think that we suffer in silence.
Right.
As allergies, so I'm an allergy sufferer myself.
Right.
And I'm sure that there are, I'm not the only one on this call, on this Zoom call, or that is on YouTube watching right now. So thank you for sharing that information. Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I didn't think that I would have so much to say at the end, but the more that I dig into this research, the more compassionate I've become. And, things happen for a reason. When I started having issues, it was about 3 years ago. I've always had allergies, but never asthma, and I think a lot of it is related to stress, hormones and things like that as well. But the idea of not being able to share that information for fear of being looked at as someone not worthy of having a career in singing is pretty scary. It's devastating. And so we don't stop there. We don't want to stop the student at.
Well, thank you so much for presenting today on behalf of all of us. On behalf of the workshop committee, we thank you for being here with us. And I think that's all we have for now. Please join us for another workshop session in about 15 minutes. And thank you again.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.